Hey everyone, it's me. So I'm sure everyone loves their fair share of horror movies. I know I do. I don't. But there are actually a solid amount of what I would call animated horror movies. And I wouldn't even necessarily call the movie I'm about to talk about today a horror movie. It's more of just disturbing, creepy, scary. Yeah, it's kind of a horror movie. The Plague Dogs, a movie that a lot of people have come to know. A lot of people have come to get traumatized by it as a child, with parents thinking, oh, that's a cute little movie about dogs. Nothing bad will happen. And then their child watches it and proceeds to get absolutely scarred for life. This movie was directed by Martin Rosen, the exact same person who directed, of course, you all guessed it, Watership Down. Watership Down fits into the same category as Plague Dogs, as one of those movies that parents thought, oh, animated cute movie with animals. Surely nothing bad will happen. And then, the movie happens. And obviously I'm not blaming the movie or the director at all. Honestly, Plague Dogs is, as a movie, a great movie, and I'll get into why. But it's more of blaming the parents for just believing that all animated movies are horror movies. And if you guys know or have seen my channel before, I have covered many movies that are animated that are also very disturbing and creepy and probably not for children. But this movie has to do with a very serious topic of, animal abuse and using animals as like science stuff, using them with their experiments and horrifically doing terrible, torturous things to them just in order to proceed in science. And in this movie, the reason it's called Plague Dogs is because the research that they were doing on these animals has to do with the bubonic plague. And they're basically injecting all these animals with the bubonic plague in order to test things, see and learn more about the bubonic plague, that kind of stuff. And it is set in the perspective of two dogs, Snitter and Ralph. And I just want to clarify before we get into this movie, if you are highly sensitive to animal abuse, I don't really think I need to say anything, but it kind of has a little bit of animal abuse in here, and it might get a little bit disturbing. Now, how the movie starts out is really just on the nose, awful. It literally makes me nauseous. Honestly, throughout the whole movie, I was pretty nauseous. Probably shouldn't have ate before watching the movie. But we get one of our main characters, and they are just paddling for life, struggling to breathe in a pool of water. And apparently they let this dog, who is Ralph, the main character, just swim as long as he can swim. And then whenever the dog proceeds to drown and give up and its body gives out, they take him out and bring him back to life, basically. Insanely fucked up. Hard to watch. I hate this part so much. They even say it was around 2 hours or something like that of the dog treading water. And apparently this has been done multiple times. And I just want to talk about the dialogue for a second. The dialogue in this movie is so good, as in it is the context of a dog, but they aren't talking like people do. When you see movies and you see animals talking, you always see it, or the dialogue is always what a human would say, but in the context of being an animal. But when it comes to this movie, the dialogue of the dogs makes sense as it being a dog, if that makes sense. Basically, how they talk to each other and how they understand things, it's in the context of how a dog would perceive it rather than how a human would perceive the situation. It's honestly hard to explain unless you watch it and see it for yourself, but it is very well done, even though it is also very hard to watch and disturbing. And also something I like about the movie is the humans, a lot of times you don't see their face that much. A lot of times the camera's just angled at their legs and lower body to show the perspective of a dog. I can't talk enough about how they did so well with that perspective of being an animal. And then we get this scene where we see one of the animals that have been tested on is dead, and then they pick up the dog with a shovel. And movie's rough, man. As an owner of many dogs, this movie is very rough to get through. And rough is is not a pun. I don't care what you say. The rough, that's not me saying rough, don't. So then we meet Snitter, who is a dog who has had something done to his brain, and you could tell by the patch on his head and mainly how he talks. This is another part where I'm talking about how the dialogue is so good, is you could tell with how the dog talks and what he focuses on and how his brain kind of just reacts in different ways. You could tell that his marbles are a little bit scrambled up there. They did something to his brain, and it's pretty obvious that it affects him deeply.
Water comes again.
What do you get out? Do you drink it? Or does the sun dry it up? Or what?
Like that line right there. I know this is based on a novel, so they probably, took a lot of the dialogue out of the novel, but like no human would say that. It is like the perspective of the dialogue of a dog, but also at the same time, the dog's brain is pretty scrambled. But I'll stop gushing about how good the dialogue is in this movie, and let's just focus on how absolutely disturbing it's gonna get. So anyway, the tobacco man, at least that's what the dogs call them, ended up leaving the gate open for Rolf's gate, and he actually, with anger, knocked the gate open, not realizing it was open, and they start to do an escape with him and Snitter. And they just walk through hell when it comes to animal experimentation. Like you see monkeys with like locked in a cage with like stuff on their head. You see rats pressing buttons. It's creepy. And the reason it's so creepy is because it's real. Like this is shit that happens. I don't know if it still happens. I assume it still happens, or it happened, but it's real, which makes it even more creepy. So on their way to escape, they end up finding themselves inside an incinerator. Obviously, they don't realize this, but that's where they go. And Rolf throughout the movie is constantly tired, obviously because of the stuff he went through with the experimentation, forcing him to swim that long. And with Snitter's brain scrambled, they don't realize that they are sitting on the ashes of previous burned dogs. They're literally laying on dead dogs. It's so fucked up. And then to make matters worse, they hear the white coats coming, which they just call them the white coats, but those are the scientists who do experimentations on them. And that dog that they shoveled up earlier that was dead, they toss it into the incinerator. And them obviously realizing what's going on, are able to escape the last minute before they also get incinerated. God, this movie is just bleh. So before they escape, Snitter actually falls asleep on the dead bodies of the previous animals, and we get to see a little bit about his past. He has a dream where he does have a previous owner, but he walks out into the middle of the road and a truck comes to hit Snitter, but his owner walks up, saves Snitter, and dies in the process. So Snitter, in his dog mind, believes that he killed his previous owner. And throughout the movie, with Snitter's brain issues that he has, we have constant flips back and forth between reality and the dream world and what is going through his brain. And it is done really well, but it is also really creepy. So this is the beginning of Rolf and Snitter becoming wild dogs, and the process of them becoming more focused on survival than anything else. And we also constantly get to see Snitter's side of his mental issues, where he talks about flies buzzing in his head and it feels like smoke. And it's just so depressing every time he talks about it, man. While Rolf, on the other hand, is constantly tired. His paws always hurt, because he's older and obviously dealt with all of that experimentation while treading water for 3 hours. But their first instance of survival is attempting to find food. And their first idea is going to a market where there is food. But their problem is they walked in, saw a man with a white apron and a knife, freaked out, and ran, even though that was just a butcher and they were thinking it was the white coats trying to take them back. And even the butcher said that, oh, look, some cute dogs, which the butcher was probably going to feed them. But because of their trauma, they freaked out and ran. And I feel like this movie does a great job at showing how trauma truly affects dogs, for example. Everything that happens in this movie, there's not really necessarily a bad guy, except the scientists, I guess we could say. But the dogs do bad things because of the trauma that they dealt with and because they're in survival mode. And the humans do bad things because they're afraid, because these dogs carry the plague and they are escaped from a facility that they don't understand what they were doing over there. So it's just a constant series of unfortunate events, if you will. And there really is no one main bad guy except probably the scientist. The argument there is obviously it's for the betterment of mankind, but you know, that's what this is all about. That's what the conversation is here in the movie. And then we just get more and more depressing scenes. Like this scene, for example, when we get Snitter dealing with his obvious mental situation that's going on, where he just sees a white line, starts panicking, and says that he's going blind. And then we see a nice man drive up, see the dog struggling, walks out, wanting to actually take Snitter in, but them being afraid of all humans at this point, Rolf steps up and he's like, no, and starts barking at the man, and they get away. It's just that depressing cycle of they are dealing with trauma and they're afraid of everything. So even when someone's trying to give a helping hand, they're just gonna be like, nah, bro, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do it anymore. God, this movie's still just so hard to watch. But that's why you're watching it with me, right, guys? Subscribe, like the video, turn on notifications. I know I haven't mentioned this yet, but the animation in this movie just adds to that layer of depressing, creepy, disturbing, unsettling vibe. This was made in the 80s, so the animation is obviously hand-drawn, but it just has a certain grittiness to it, a certain bleakness to the animation. It's really hard to explain, but you could probably see what I'm talking about by just watching some of these clips of the movie. It just feels bleak, dark, unsettling, creepy the whole time. I mean, the animation is very similar to Watership Down, so it's kind of the same concept. And after they talked to a couple dogs that did have owners, they started to realize they are strays now. They are wild dogs. And so they lean into that. Rolf even tells Snitter it's time for us to start killing in order to survive. And their first victim happens to be a sheep. And this is basically where shit starts hitting the fan. Because when dead sheep happen, farmers notice that, and then yeah, you get where this is going. And throughout the movie, every time Snitter and Rolf do something, there happens to be a dialogue behind them, like an overdub of the humans having conversations. Like there's a moment where the white coats are talking to each other about they figured out that they escaped and they're trying to figure out how they escaped. And then there's a part where there's farmers talking about how they're losing sheep randomly and they don't understand why, and they're going to try to figure out what's going on and kill the threat kind of thing.
It's most unfortunate.
As far as I can make out, there was a length of wire netting loose, and 815 must have got under sometime that night.
But if the door had been fastened, it wouldn't open of its own accord, would it?
I really feel like this movie was set up in such a cool way. I mean, I've said this many times, but that perspective of being a dog, but instead of seeing the humans have a conversation about what's going on, you just see what the two main character dogs are doing while there's an overdub of humans, you know, conversating about what to do next because of their actions. But next we run into the Todd, which personally is my favorite character of the movie. It's just a fox, and the fox does fox things. He's sly, he's sneaky, he's smart, he's tricky, and he kind of becomes the guide for Snitter and Rolf in order to become more wild dogs, and even teach them a better method to kill sheep without Rolf having to actually fight the sheep. They use this method where they bait the sheep up a mountain and then push the sheep off the ledge in order for the sheep to die from fall damage. And Todd is kind of a come and go character throughout the movie because he helps them for a little bit, and then Rolf does something stupid like kill a sheep in the middle of the farm where the farmer's gonna see, and then Todd's like, hey yo, I'm about to head out. Y'all are kind of being stupid and you're gonna get caught. But throughout the movie, he always peeks his way back in. He's always constantly watching Rolf and Snitter, and then just when the time comes, he pops up. But throughout the movie, he's insanely helpful, even though he's a little bit of a dick. But this is where shit starts getting really bad because the farmers decide it's time to go find the animals that are killing their sheep. It's time to bring out their dogs and bring out their guns and try to figure out what's going on. And basically, they want to kill Snitter and Rolf. And the Todd appears, even though he looks like he's just trying to steal their food, but he does tell them like, hey, yo, they're coming for you. You better start moving. Oh, that's a nice man. Oh my God. So Snitter ends up taking a walk. He finds this nice man. It's finally going to be over. Snitter's finally going to be, oh, go! Oh my God, why? Why? So yeah, Snitter accidentally kills someone. Like he can't catch a break, man. And then we get this part of the movie, which just like is is so gross. And it's not gory. It's not like, ew, gross. It's more of just disturbing because one of the white coats, one of the scientists who constantly experiment on dogs, torture monkeys, torture a bunch of different animals, almost drowned Rolf multiple times, did a brain experiment on Snitter. We see him talking to his wife while petting his cute little dog. It's just, something is so absolutely disgusting about how he is just torturing animals constantly for science, torturing dogs. And then he just has a dog as a pet and treats that dog very kindly. It's just, I don't really know how to describe it. It just makes my stomach turn, it really just makes me want to throw up out of disgust. It's disgusting. So now, not only have they murdered multiple sheep, but now Snitter accidentally murdered a human. So obviously they are just on the news. Everyone's talking about it. Everyone's trying to find these dogs, and it is just becoming worse and worse for Snitter and Rolf. And it is very depressing because it is not their fault. So Snitter and Rolf try to break into someone's farm and steal some chickens. They end up getting caught, but they actually get let go because everyone has discovered now that they are infected with the bubonic plague. And so the farmer's wife is like, hey, yo, we don't even want to deal with them. Just give him a chicken and get out of here, because people are now absolutely terrified that they're going to get infected with the bubonic plague as well. So I'm not sure how much time passes here, but it's snowing now. So we're going to assume like a month or so, maybe. And they're starting to realize that no one wants anything to do with them because of the fact that they've been labeled as having the bubonic plague. And to make matters even worse, there's even a worse part in this movie. Somehow, after everything we've been through, it's gonna get worse. So a man named Mr. Auckland is going out in order to find these dogs and kill them himself. And he happens to find Snitter and Ralph, even lines up the shot. But Mr. Todd, the sly fox, the sneaky asshole, ends up knocking Mr. Auckland off the cliff that he was standing on, and he falls to his death. And you think, oh, all right, yeah, 2 men dead from these dogs. That's bad enough, right? Well, you see, not all that happens. You see, when they find Mr. Auckland's body, they don't just find Mr. Auckland's body. They find what's left of his body. Yeah, they ate him. And you can't blame them either, because it's survival. They're trying to survive. They ate a human trying to survive. God, this movie is so fucked up, dude. Holy shit. This ain't a kids movie, mom. Mommies out there that bought their kids this movie, it ain't for kids. But obviously, this is where shit goes crazy. They break out helicopters. They break out freaking soldiers. They break out everything they can in order to find these dogs. 2 humans are dead. Shit's getting serious. It's not the dog's fault. I mean, it's a little bit of Todd's fault on the second one, I'd say. But regardless, yeah, they're coming. So Todd has been leading the way this entire time. He's been keeping them safe, away from the helicopter, away from the people with the guns, away from the other dogs. And things are starting to look pretty good. They might escape. And then Todd says this is where we part ways. Todd is going to basically cause a distraction in order for them to get away. But Todd, the little Todd boy, he didn't make it. You see, right when Todd tries to leave in order to distract them, they release many dogs from different angles, and they all chase Todd down. And Todd, even though he's sneaky, he's able to sneak through stuff. Yeah, he don't make it. And just hearing the yelp of Todd, just like, it cuts to your core, man. Oh, God, I hate that part so much. As you can tell, I'm way more upset about the animal deaths than I am about the human death. I mean, except the nice farmer guy. That guy was pretty nice, right? So the ending of the film is just as depressing as the rest of the movie. The book differs from the movie. The book actually has a happier ending than what the movie implies. So what happens in the movie is Rolf and Snitter end up reaching, which I believe to be, I don't know if it's an ocean or a lake. It's probably the ocean. And Snitter sees an island off in the distance, but in the movie, there is no island. So we're all assuming this is probably just his head messing with them. So Snitter starts swimming out, and Rolf, obviously terrified of the ocean, but even more terrified of the people chasing him, swims out to catch Snitter. They start swimming, and when they're swimming, you start realizing, oh, they ain't going anywhere. There ain't no island. However, the very end of the movie leaves off with just a picture of an island off in the distance. This could mean multiple things. There's theories about this. This just implies that the island is a representation of death, like they're swimming to their death, which is extremely depressing. However, in the novel, they were actually picked up by some sailors and they were cared for and lived a happy life. But the movie kind of leaves it open-ended. They're like, yep, they might die. That might be a fake island made up in Snitter's head, but they also might make it to the island. Or they might get picked up like in the book. But it is an insanely depressing, open-ended ending of a movie. But all in all, this movie really is kind of an underrated gem because of the stigma it had by being a disturbing, depressing animated movie. Whereas we all know, especially in the 80s, animated movies are considered children's stuff. So when you have something like Watership Down or Plague Dogs, you know, a lot of people would consider that to be like, oh, how dare you make an animated movie scary? And a lot of mothers and dads, you know, rented out movies or bought movies like Play Dogs, Watership Down, thinking it's a happy-go-lucky, fun animal movie, turns out to be depressing, traumatizing. But it is a solid expression of, like, the human condition, if you will. And it's really well done through the eyes of the dogs. And, it really opens that conversation about animal experimentation and how awful it is. And it's like that idea of what is really the cost of, proceeding into science when it comes to animal testing and stuff. Is it really worth what you put all these animals through, what we discover with it? There is a lot of debate with that, and that is a very open-ended conversation, which this movie challenges you to talk about. But at the end of the day, you should subscribe to me because I had to watch this, and it was depressing. I was sad. I felt nauseous throughout the movie. So in return for my kind service, you should subscribe. You should like. You should share this with your friends. Tell everyone about me, even your dog. I'm going to go cry in a corner now. Bye.